With films like Deadpool and Captain America Civil War already setting a really high bar for superhero movies this year, can X-Men Apocalypse reach that level of excellence and just downright fun? Let's find out together. This is Old, New, and Now Playing. Hello and welcome to Old, New, and Now Playing, your time machine through the world of movies. I'm your host, Will Robinson Smith, and thank you so much for joining me on this very first episode of Old, New, and Now Playing. It's been a long time in the making, a long process to get here, and thank you so much for being patient with me and for joining me on this very first episode. Now, for those of you who didn't get a chance to watch my little explanation video about what this project is all about, what Old, New, and Now Playing will consist of is a tri-weekly series that examines film throughout the decades, in relative terms according to the title. Old will be looking at films from 30 years and older, New will be within the last 30 years, and Now Playing is going to be films, of course, that are in theaters right now. And at the start of every episode, no matter what period of time we're talking about, we want to keep it rooted in the now with something called The Rundown.
Don't say it. Don't you say it.
Left.
Come on!
Kicking off the rundown with a little bit of casting news, John Ortiz and Axel Hennie are slated to join Paramount and Bad Robot's next movie venture, God Particle, that's according to Variety. Ortiz has been seen in such films as The Finest Hours and Steve Jobs and will be seen next year in Kong Skull Island. Meanwhile, Hennie was most recently seen in The Martian. The film is about scientists aboard the International Space Station trying to tap into the God Particle as an energy source, and things go awry. The film also stars Daniel Brohl, Elizabeth Debicki, John Krasinski, Gugu Mbatha-Raw, Chris O'Dowd, and David Oyelowo, and is slated to come out in 2017. I'm definitely looking forward to this project. You know, a couple of good actors on top of an already stacked cast. You really can't go wrong there. And when you have a producer like J.J. Abrams going back into space, something we know he does really well, it's definitely something to be excited about. According to Collider, actress Rosa Salazar is set to play the lead in Robert Rodriguez's next film, Battle Angel. Now, this is based on a manga series called Battle Angel Alita, which is about a female cyborg in the 26th century who suffers from amnesia. She's recovered and repaired, but without her memories, she only retains her ability to use martial arts and decides to become a bounty hunter and chases down villains. Rosa Salazar is known for her roles in The Maze Runner, The Scorch Trials, and Insurgent. James Cameron was originally set to helm the project himself, but after he announced that he was going to be making 4 Avatar sequels, he handed off the property to Robert Rodriguez, believing that the project would be in good hands, saying, "This project is near and dear to me, and there's nobody I trust more than Robert, with his technical virtuosity and rebel style, to take over the directing reins. We're looking forward to learning a lot from each other while we make a kick-ass epic." And while I'm not terribly familiar with Salazar's acting background, I do trust Cameron and Rodriguez to cast this movie well, and the premise sounds like a really cool idea, so I'm really excited for the project. I can't wait to see a first trailer. I think that's really going to give us a better idea of what we're in store for. And finally in the rundown, costumes equal more movies? Well, according to Lionsgate CEO John Feldheimer, there's been positive response and reaction to the costumes for the new Power Rangers movie, which he says is evidence of audience interest. That's according to Variety. He's quoted as saying, "We're really excited about the Power Rangers movie. We could see doing 5 or 6 or 7. Now, admittedly, I wasn't the biggest Power Rangers fan growing up. I was more into cartoons of Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network during the 90s. But I think this is an interesting property, and I thought the costumes looked pretty good, albeit a little Iron Man-esque, as many people have pointed out. But I think you kind of need to pump the brakes when you're talking about 5 or 6 or 7 movies based on what people thought of the costumes. I think that's a bit much, so let's just see a first trailer and certainly the first movie before we talk about a trilogy or 5 to 7 movies. I think that's a bit much. Well, that's the rundown, guys, and now, of course, we're going to launch straight into the main part of the video, your feature presentation. This film sees the X-Men step into the 80s, and it's the third film in the new trilogy of X-Men movies that came out, starting with X-Men First Class, continuing with Days of Future Past, and right now lands us with Apocalypse. The film sees the return of stars James McAvoy as Professor Charles Xavier, Michael Fassbender as Eric Lehnsherr or Magneto, and Jennifer Lawrence as the shape-shifting Mystique. The film centers around the emergence of an ancient and powerful mutant known as En Sabah Nur, who's played by Oscar Isaac, whom we've recently seen in such standout films as Ex Machina and Star Wars The Force Awakens. The newly budding X-Men have to band together to stop this powerful mutant, who has assembled his 4 horsemen of the apocalypse in an attempt to wipe out the world and leave it only for the strongest. Overall, I really enjoyed this film. I thought it was a nice continuation of this new set of X-Men films that started with X-Men First Class, continued into Days of Future Past, and now sort of culminates, at least for now, with X-Men Apocalypse. You know, one of the best parts I thought about this film was the interaction between Charles Xavier and Magneto, which is something, of course, that has been a continuous current throughout all of the X-Men films, the Wolverine solo films notwithstanding. But the way that James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender play off of each other, that sort of brotherhood tension where Charles is trying to pull Magneto back from the brink, you sort of see that play out multiple times. It's sort of that chess metaphor that they've been going off of throughout pretty much the entire X-Men franchise. Was really nicely continued in this film. Very believable between those two actors. Obviously, they've built a nice rapport over the last 2 films, continuing into this one, and that's something really fun to see them play off of. Another nice part of the film was getting to see the campus life at Xavier School for the Gifted Youngsters really be fleshed out. It's where you get to meet some of the characters for the first time, and I'm not going to go into any spoilers, of course, and exactly what those interactions are, but it's a nice chance to let the film breathe away from some of the high points of action, you know, throughout the rest of the film. It's, you know, some nice breathing room, some good introductions to new characters. And speaking of new characters, the new introductions that you see in the film, the introduction of Jean Grey and Storm and Cyclops and Nightcrawler are all really well done. I thought those were good actors to put in those roles, good additions to the film, and I think will serve the franchise moving forward. And another thing that I thought was definitely a highlight that I want to emphasize in this review was the fact that this movie is really funny. You know, in Marvel films, on the Disney side of Marvel, that is Marvel Studios proper, you know, we're sort of used to there being, you know, a constant sense of fun and levity and, you know, those moments of humor sprinkled in. Well, this film definitely takes some of those points and carries it forward into the X-Men franchise. Quicksilver, for instance, is a character that we saw in Days of Future Past have that standout scene when they're rescuing Magneto, and it was just a really scene and show-stealing moment. And, you know, that was a character that certainly in this film had a lot of the laughs and a lot of the levity. He had his serious moments too, but it was nice to see a lot of those characters have their own moments of spontaneity and fun, even when the film got into some dark places. They never went full on dark in a way that just felt dour and got you down. It was dark when it needed to be, but also brought it back in a way that felt very even throughout the film. But of course, no movie is perfect. There were certainly some things that I thought, you know, could have been done a little bit better. One of the characters who was introduced that you see highlighted in the trailers is one of the characters from the animated series in the 90s, and that's Jubilee. And if you watch just the trailers, you might get the impression that you'll get a good dose of Jubilee in the film, and I felt like she was kind of underserved, and you'll see what I mean when you watch the film. But I thought, you know, considering that she was obviously very prominent as a nod to the fans of the animated series and of the comics, that they could have done, I would think, a little bit more with that character. Just felt like a bit of a waste since they were going to be drawing attention to it anyway. Another thing that I thought could have been just a little bit better, Apocalypse, while a very cool character, I liked the physical look of him, his powers were really cool. I felt they were a bit inconsistent though, because you see him do some things in some points of the film that you feel like at certain points later on would make sense for him to do certain things that he doesn't do, and you just kind of wonder like where that power went. And it's one of those things in a comic book movie that you just kind of have to throw your hands up and say it's a movie, just suspension of disbelief for that part of it. Honestly, it didn't detract terribly. It was just something that I noticed as the film went on that was a little inconsistent for me. But again, it was sort of more of a nitpick kind of thing. It wasn't something that completely sold the movie for me. And, on the whole, I really liked Oscar Isaac's portrayal of the character. I thought he did a wonderful job bringing that to life. And I appreciated the fact that they did that as practically as they did. And it wasn't just, a completely CGI character for Apocalypse, which they certainly could have done. But I appreciated the fact that they had Isaac in the prosthetics, and I thought that was a really well-handled character. Overall, I thought this was a great movie. I saw it in 3D. I don't think it needs to be seen in 3D. Some films, seeing it in 3D adds a really nice dimension to it and can enhance the film. I thought it was fine. It wasn't distracting, but for the money you could save from seeing it in just regular 2D to seeing it in 3D, might as well keep that money in your pocket. Maybe get a slightly larger bucket of popcorn with that money, or just save it for the next movie. But 3D, nah, not worth it for this one. And so those are my thoughts on X-Men Apocalypse. Of course, when you see the movie, let me know what you thought. Comment below, hit me up on Twitter, and speaking of Twitter, it's time for the last part of this movie series video, which of course is Pop Tweets. Now, this is the section where I'll be taking viewer-submitted questions by Twitter. You can tweet at me, my handle at W_Robinson Smith. Just use the hashtag Pop Tweets, and you can get a question possibly asked and answered on this show. We're just gonna do one for now, keep this short, kind of wrap it up at the end of this first video. And this tweet comes from Brittany Rodriguez at the BRodArt, who asks, Will, why are you personally passionate about movies of any generation? Well, to answer that sort of answers why I decided to do this series at all. And thank you, Brittany, for asking that question. She's certainly a friend of the show, and I appreciate the question. I've just been a fan of movies for most of my life. Grew up around, the sort of the golden renaissance of Disney films. You're talking about Little Mermaid, Aladdin, that sort of film. And, that got me interested in seeing other movies. And, growing up, I was seeing a lot of stuff that was happening and coming out. As I was growing up, I would, dip back into the past a little bit with my family, but we didn't see tons and tons of old movies. But as I got older, I was realizing that was something that I really wanted to introduce into my life. And, there were a lot of times when I just didn't have time after work. And, on the weekends, I would want to go see a movie that was currently out in theaters because I wanted to stay, fresh and, up to date and have something to talk about when I got back to work. But I felt like it was time to really start looking at some of those old films, because those are ones that people, point to, especially when they're talking about current films, and are ones that they love and cherish. And, I think it's really important, if you're a person that loves movies and you love going to the cinema and you love that movie experience, it's important to, have as wide of a library and a catalog for yourself as possible. And so that's what this series is all about, really, truly. I want to learn more about movies. I want you to learn with me. We're going to see a lot of great stuff as we go along coming up next week. And I'll be dropping on Twitter what Monday's Old Review is going to be. New, I think I've almost got that nailed down. And the following weekend, week from today, I'll be reviewing the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, Out of the Shadows. So be sure to watch for that. That'll be coming next Friday. And of course, old and new reviews coming on Monday and Wednesday. Guys, thank you so much for this first episode. That's going to be a wrap for me. As always, you can follow me on Twitter. Again, that's at W_Robinson Smith. I'll try to respond to as many messages as possible. If you have any questions, of course, that you want to see on the show, tweet at me using the hashtag PopTweets. put some comments in this video. You know, I'd love to see that interaction, you know, and chat amongst yourselves. You know, what are some movies that are your favorites? Why are you a passionate film fan? What are some movies that you want to see me review? I'll take a look at the list, see, you know, I've got some ideas of, you know, how I want to structure things going forward, but definitely want to incorporate your ideas into it. And if you have any other ideas about what you think of the show in general, if you like the format, things you think worked, things you think should be changed, I want to hear all that from you. So leave your comments, leave your thoughts, leave your questions. I look forward to reading them. So guys, that's it. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I'll see you next time.